A rescued group of chimps see the outside for the first time in their lives. What a surreal moment. Here are 15 rescued animals seeing the outside for the first time. Number 15. African penguins. While we usually think of penguins as being animals that live on the icy coast around Antarctica, there are a few species that are native to warmer places, such as the sandy beaches around Africa. Their proximity to human activity means that African penguins often find themselves in difficulties, and there are a number of sanctuaries around the continent that are dedicated to rescuing those that have been injured and eventually releasing them back into the wild. The moment that a penguin is ready to re-enter the ocean is a magical one, and are often done in large events that attract hundreds of visitors in order to raise further funds for the work that the sanctuaries do. This video was recorded in 2012 on Seaforth Beach in Simonstown, South Africa, when a flock of more than 30 were freed back into their natural environment. At first, they hardly knew what to do with themselves, but after dipping their toes in the water and going for their first swim, they were ready to go off and start a new life together. Number 14. Chimps. Chimps are one of the closest species on Earth to our own, and during various stages of their lives will exhibit what we would recognize as being distinctly human-like behavior. It's because of these behavioral, physical, and biological similarities that they're often used in scientific research, but unfortunately those that are bred for this purpose are kept in cold, sterile conditions. It was a practice that became extremely common in the 19th and 20th centuries, but fortunately is being increasingly phased out thanks to advances in technology and pressure from animal rights groups. While the number that are taken into captivity for research has vastly reduced, there are still some that have spent their entire lives in laboratories, but they too are now often released. This leads to some incredible images, because after only knowing cages for their entire lives, they can explore the outside for the first time. This video shows just how momentous an occasion this is for them, and you can see the joy and excitement on their faces. Not only is it wonderful to see, but this is as powerful a sight as you'll ever see that proves these animals shouldn't be kept in captivity, away from their natural surroundings. Number 13. Bears' first time seeing greenery. Due to their enormous size and ferocity, bears have long been fascinating to people. They used to be captured in their hundreds to become part of a circus or a zoo, but it's impossible to keep an animal that prowls across such a wide area in a comfortable cage. Unfortunately, many of them are kept in horrific conditions and may not even see the grass, trees, or the sky for their entire lives. The bear in this video was, for example, born and kept in an indoor concrete enclosure, which certainly made life easier for his keepers to contain him and clean, but led to developmental and health problems. Luckily, the Wildwood Trust, which is an organization dedicated to rehoming animals, was able to take care of him and offer him a brand new life. After many months of quarantine and rehabilitation to nurse the 16-year-old bear back to life, he was finally ready to be released into his new 1.5-acre enclosure. Unfortunately, because he's never been in the wild, he'll never be able to be fully free, but the facilities being provided to him here are surely the next best thing. And you can see how he hardly knows what to make of it, but soon settles in on the grass. Number 12. Owls. The international wildlife trades put so many rare species at threat because of the huge amounts of money animal collectors around the world are willing to pay for unusual species. And to get them past authorities before boarding planes or boats, the creatures are often kept in appalling conditions. In 2019, police in the Indian city of Ghaziabad received a tip-off that smugglers were planning to travel with a consignment of animals to sell. But even they couldn't have been prepared for what they were about to find. When they opened up the tub in the back of the truck, 5 owls were looking back up at them. It's thought that the animals had been stolen before they had hatched from their eggs, so were born in captivity and never had actually seen the outside before. Horrifically, they weren't destined for becoming pets or going on display, but as part of a sacrificial ritual that is occasionally performed during religious celebrations. Fortunately, on this occasion, they were found and rescued, and these owls were given to the forest department, who began work to find a suitable home for them while they recovered from their ordeal. Number 11. Battery farm chickens. We rely so much on being able to go to the local store to buy our food that we rarely think of how it's possible to have so much meat available to purchase whenever we need it. There are some farms that ensure they keep livestock in humane conditions. There are others that pack in as many individuals as possible to maximize their profit, which leads to some pretty horrific conditions. Because they're able to survive without very much space, this happens quite often with chickens, who are given hardly any room to move and may never see the sky or the ground. This video was recorded in Australia in 2014 when an animal campaigner visited a battery chicken farm, and begins by showing just how awful the animals were being treated. They were released and allowed to venture outside, and it's amazing to see them exploring around. This would have been the first time they had ever breathed fresh air and seen greenery, which surely should be a basic right for every animal. Number 10. Dairy cows. Cow milk is one of the most popular farmyard products, with more than 217 billion pounds sold in the US each year. Even though alternatives such as nut milk are becoming more popular, there's still a huge demand. And to satisfy these needs, there needs to be a lot of cows that can be milked on a regular basis. Depending on how intensively this is done, the animals have varying qualities of life. Some are free to roam the fields, something that arguably produces better milk as well as being far more kind to them, while others are kept in indoor pens on concrete floors, which increases yield and makes it far easier to clean, but has obvious ethical concerns. Cows kept in these conditions are put there when they're young and never have the chance to explore outside. This means that if they're ever let outdoors, they're introduced to a whole new existence, one that's far more suited to living creatures. This video shows what happened when a herd of milk cows were finally released from the indoors, and they literally begin jumping for joy. We so often think of them as being grazers that don't move around very much, which makes their excitement here all the more clear to see. Number 9. Horses run free. When animals are kept as pets, they rely solely on their owners to provide them with everything they need to survive. Unfortunately, not everyone takes this responsibility as seriously as they should, and it can result in the animal becoming severely unwell to the point of where, if no one steps in, they will die. That's what almost happened in the case of 2 horses called Fleur and Tamarisk, who became severely malnourished after going weeks without food. Luckily, the Easy Horse Care Rescue Center was able to take them into their care before it was too late and put them on a diet regime intended to restore them to a healthy weight. This took several months to do, and during that time the horses were too unwell to leave the indoor pen. This video was filmed when they were finally ready to go back outside again. And while they still had further to go before they were totally healthy, you can see how happy they were to get back out into the fresh air. They were introduced to a field with 6 other horses that had also recently been rescued by the center, and they all thankfully looked set to make a full recovery. We are constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Small spotted Ganic cats. Small spotted Ganic cats are native to the African savannas, and living in such a potentially harsh environment, they rely heavily on their parents to feed and teach them during the first few months of their lives. In 2018, rangers found 3 babies that had been abandoned in the Sabi Sands Reserve near the Kruger National Park in South Africa. And if they hadn't been taken into care, there's no chance they would have survived for very long. They were looked after by the Hoedspruit Endangered Species Center, where workers hand-fed them milk and weaned them onto their natural diet. They were kept in a small enclosure during their formative months, but the intent of the facility is to teach animals like these the skills they need to live in the wild. So in this video, we see them during a soft release at Camp Jabulani. The larger area they were introduced to is still fenced and allows for staff to continue to feed them. But several weeks later, the doors were opened so they could begin to explore the surrounding area by themselves without restriction, with the hope that they'd begin to hunt for themselves and no longer need the assistance of the center. Number 7. Experimental rabbits. Rabbits are one of the most common animals that are used in laboratory experimentation, not because they're similar to humans in any way, but because they're docile, don't cost as much to feed, can easily be restrained, and breed very quickly. Thankfully, the practice of animal testing is becoming less and less common, but there are still thought to be at least 150,000 kept for these purposes in the US alone. So that experiments can be run in controlled conditions, the rabbits are kept in cages in sterile laboratories and never have the chance to go outside or live any semblance of a normal life. Here, a group of rabbits have been rescued from a recently closed facility, and they were immediately taken to a nearby field so they could begin their new lives of freedom. This is the first time in their lives that they've been outside of a cage, and just feeling the earth underneath their paws must have been an unbelievable experience. It's also the first time they've actually been able to interact with each other without bars separating them, and shows just how important it is for them to be able to socialize in groups. Number 6. Pangolins. Pangolins are an endangered species of scaled mammal that are native to the regions across Asia and South America. The nocturnal animals spend most of their time climbing trees, but their population numbers are at risk because of the international demand for them for use in medicine, as pets, and for their meat. In fact, it's such a problem that they're the world's most illegally traded animals. For this reason, several rescue centers are devoted to nursing and taking care of ones that have been found in distress, such as Save Vietnam's Wildlife, which has particular focus on the animals. In 2018, the organization released a video of what happened when they released a Sunda pangolin back into the wild. It had been rescued from captivity after having been captured by poachers to export abroad, and was in a very fragile state. After several months of nursing and care, however, it was ready to be released back into its forest home where, with a bit of luck, it'll be safe from poachers for the rest of its life. Number 5. Pet garter snake. Snakes are quite popular pets for people who don't want something as normal as a cat or a dog, but they are at heart wild animals that would be far better off being able to live in the outdoors and not restricted to a small tank. In this video, a snake enthusiast found a garter snake outdoors that had been attacked by another animal, and instead of letting nature take its course, he took it indoors to help nurse it back to health. When he took it in, it was quite young, and he took care of it for several months before it fully regained its strength. Even though he had provided it with a safe environment to recuperate in, there's nothing quite like the outside, and you can see how pleased the snake is when it's finally ready to be released. It goes straight for the stream for a swim before slithering away into the undergrowth. Number 4. Injured squirrel. Human activity is sadly the cause of countless animal injuries every year, and the vast majority of these happen purely by accident. Squirrels are common victims because they can be difficult for drivers to spot when they're crossing the road, but in some cases their injuries aren't too severe and they can be nursed back to health. This squirrel had been hit by a car and broke both of its legs, but a local charity was able to provide medical care straight away, and it was soon on its way to recovery. It was kept indoors in a glass tank for 6 months, and despite providing it with as much comfort as was feasible, the animal surely spent most of its time there wishing it could be back in the great outdoors. If you need any further proof that this was the case, then you only need to see what it does when the cage is finally opened. It leaps out almost faster than you can see and runs straight towards the tree line.
Oh, there he goes.
Number 3. Rhinos. Rhinos are, unfortunately, one of the most commonly poached species of animals in the world, and this has led them to becoming critically endangered. There's a greater consequence to killing of an individual than it may seem, because there's also the potential knock-on effect of what happens if they're caring for newborns, as is what happened in the case of Gertji and Matimba. These young rhinos were found whimpering in the wild after watching their mother being slaughtered by poachers, but they themselves were left behind because they didn't have large enough horns to be worth anything. Luckily, instead of having to fend for themselves, they were taken in by a rescue center that looked after them for the next 5 years. It's not fair to keep animals like these in captivity for their entire lives, though, so their time there was always with a view to them one day fending for themselves. They were finally released back into the wild, and to see them taking their first steps was a joy for everyone involved in their care. Number 2. Tigers. Siberian tigers are an extremely rare species after years of poaching, and there are now thought to only be around 360 of them remaining in the wild. Despite attempts to protect them, illegal hunting still happens, and in 2011 poachers killed a female, which resulted in her 3 cubs being orphaned. The International Fund for Animal Welfare heard about them and stepped in to work with partners in eastern Russia to find a safe place for them to be kept while they were provided with food and the opportunity to recover from their experience. The intent was always to release them back into the wild once they were strong enough to hunt and look after themselves. And finally, after 3 years, it was time. They were loaded into containers and taken to their new home, and once everyone was out of the way, the gates were opened one by one. The tigers were so excited by their freedom that they ran off as fast as they could and went on to settle down and prove that efforts to rehabilitate animals like these are well worth it. Number 1. Loggerhead turtle. Turtles face incredible odds throughout their lives to reach adulthood, with only 1 in 10,000 thought to reach the age where they can breed. It's important then, if injured turtles are found, that they're given the best chance to recover so they can be released back into water to protect the species. This loggerhead was found floating offshore from southern Martin County, Florida, where one of its sides was more buoyant than the other, which made it impossible for it to swim properly. It was lifted on board a rescue boat and taken to SeaWorld Orlando, where experts helped treat the animal for its injuries and nursed it back to full health. After a few months, it was ready to return home, and workers carried the 135-pound turtle back to the water at Hobe Beach. It's virtually motionless as they lower it down, but as soon as it sees the water, it starts to move towards it. After sliding into the surf, it's able to paddle with its giant flippers and submerges back down to the depths once more. Subscribe to Top 5s for more and check out some of our other popular videos.